Welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. The Senate today passed a stopgap bill to hold off a potential government shutdown. The temporary fix will keep the government open through late December. The action came hours before tonight's midnight deadline. California's highest court found a controversial law passed this summer violates the state's constitution. The law requires candidates from president and governor to release their tax returns to get on the state's ballot. A woman working for a Chinese airline was sentenced today for smuggling packages for the Chinese military. She worked for a Chinese state-owned airline but was based in New York. Israel's Attorney General announced the indictment of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. He is accused of accepting over $200,000 in gifts. Store owners in Paris are already embracing the Christmas spirit, but it isn't cheap. This year, the cost of the extravagant decorations was between $100,000 and $300,000. In an effort to prevent a government shutdown that was slated to begin on Friday, the Senate today approved a stopgap bill. The short-term fix was sent to President Trump's desk just hours before the midnight deadline.
The yeas are 74, the nays are 20. The motion is agreed to.
Senators voted 74-20 to approve the resolution, which will fund the federal government until December 20th. The House already approved the action on Tuesday, and now President Trump is expected to sign it. The partisan divide over funding the U.S.-Mexico border wall has so far prevented Congress from approving a government funding bill.
Government spending, the defense bill we've passed every year since 1961, the trade agreement with Mexico and Canada sitting there unacted upon. Really, this is outrageous.
Some GOP lawmakers also blame the House's focus on impeachment.
There are things that we have to do that we're not making any progress on because of the impeachment obsession over in the House.
The bill also reportedly provides funding for U.S. census measures, a military pay raise, and surveillance programs. Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer told reporters that he is optimistic that the passing of the resolution is a sign that both sides of the aisle are ready to work together to settle government funding by the end of the calendar year.
The California Supreme Court ruled that candidates for president don't have to disclose their tax returns to get on the state's ballot.
The law was signed in July by California Governor Gavin Newsom. At the time, Democrats were accused of targeting President Trump, who hasn't disclosed his tax returns. The law requires any candidate for president or governor to turn over 5 years of their tax returns to get on the ballot. After it was signed, the law was immediately challenged in court. Shortly before the California Supreme Court ruling, Trump said he would put out a financial statement. He said in the Thursday morning tweet that it will only show one thing, that I am much richer than people even thought. He is fighting a case in the U.S. Supreme Court against the House Oversight Committee, which has subpoenaed his New York accounting firm. Earlier in the week, the Supreme Court overruled lower courts, temporarily blocking the release of Trump's tax returns. Trump is also fighting another case before the Supreme Court over a subpoena for his taxes by New York State prosecutors.
Impeachment dominated the opening segment of the fifth Democratic debate last night. It came just hours after the latest public testimony in the Democrat-led impeachment inquiry.
Candidate and former Vice President Joe Biden is at the center of the impeachment investigation alongside his son Hunter. During the debate in Atlanta, Georgia, he said he learned from the hearings that neither President Trump nor Russia's Vladimir Putin want him to win the Democratic nomination. If the House passes articles of impeachment, next there would be a trial in the Senate. In that case, Democratic Senators Bernie Sanders, Amy Klobuchar, Kamala Harris, and Elizabeth Warren would be in a unique position. They would preside as jury at the Senate trial of the president while also campaigning against him in the 2020 election. 2/3 of senators need to vote for impeachment to remove him from office.
The tough part's going to be succeeding in a trial in the Senate because it would require a couple dozen Republicans to actually vote for impeachment. There's been no indication that that would happen.
With less than 3 months before the first voting contest, other big questions hang over the frontrunners. One of the biggest is the future of health care in America. Biden countered that many people are happy with the private insurance through their jobs. Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, Indiana, complained that some candidates were trying to order people into universal health care, quote, whether they like it or not, unquote. The White House has not commented on the debate.
And now to New York, where a woman was sentenced after pleading guilty earlier this year to working for officers of the Chinese military without notifying the U.S. government. The Justice Department says she abused her management position at a Chinese airline company in New York. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more from the courthouse.
Yin Ling, the former manager of a state-owned Chinese airlines company, was sentenced to 5 years of probation for acting as an agent of the Chinese Communist Party. While Ying worked for Air China at the JFK airport, she would smuggle the luggage of Chinese military officials aboard flights from New York to Beijing. These Chinese officials were not passengers on these flights, which is a violation of TSA rules. Only the baggage of ticketed passengers is allowed on board. She would also put the baggage under the names of other passengers. This way, Chinese officials would avoid inspection of their luggage by the U.S. government. The judge said this case does involve a national security risk, and the federal government suggested that the judge give Ying a 4-year prison sentence. But she said this case has unusual circumstances, and she considered Ying's recent volunteer work in her ruling. But she said that this in no way condones the crime that she committed. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
A U.S. judge today rebuked Jeffrey Epstein's estate about a fund for victims of sexual abuse. The judge said the estate kept Epstein's alleged victims in the dark about it.
The estate is facing at least 14 lawsuits from women and proposed creating the fund to settle the claims out of court. It's not yet known how much is in the fund. A lawyer for the alleged victims called it truly extraordinary that the accusers were not consulted about the amount. The judge agreed, saying the decision could not be unilateral. The judge ordered both sides to talk and report back on their progress by January 10th. Epstein, a multimillionaire, faced charges of sex trafficking before he was found dead in his jail cell on August 10th. His death has been ruled a suicide. In 2008, he pleaded guilty to soliciting prostitution from a minor and served 13 months in prison.
A fallen World War II soldier from Iowa has finally returned home after 76 years. At just 17 years old, Channing Robert Whittaker enlisted in the Marines in December of 1942. He was killed in action during the invasion of the Betio Island on November 22, 1943. Decades later, his remains were identified through a DNA match thanks to History Flight, a volunteer organization that helps fund searches for missing servicemen. A funeral service is scheduled for tomorrow. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was indicted on corruption charges. This as the country deals with the possibility of a third election in less than a year.
Corruption allegations facing Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have now turned into indictments. Israel's Attorney General made the announcement on Thursday. The Prime Minister is accused of wrongfully accepting $264,000 in gifts from business tycoons and giving favors in return for favorable media coverage. He could face up to 10 years in prison if convicted. He's under no legal obligation to resign at this point, and he's always denied any wrongdoing. But it comes as the country is already facing the prospect of its third election in less than a year, because Netanyahu wasn't able to form a coalition government, and then his main rival, Benny Gantz, also failed to do so.
Up next, the US Congress has approved 2 bills aimed at supporting Hong Kong protesters, sending a strong warning to the Chinese Communist Party about using force with the protesters. More on that after the break. US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi signed legislation today backing protesters in Hong Kong. The bills have been sent to the White House, where President Trump is expected to sign them into law.
The House overwhelmingly approved the bills Wednesday, a day after the Senate passed them on voice votes. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Thursday it is the duty of the U.S. to speak out against human rights abuses.
If America does not speak up for human rights in China because of commercial issues, we lose all moral authority to speak about human rights anywhere in the world.
To President Xi, this resolution is what America thinks of you and your policies towards the people in Hong Kong.
We don't stand here today as Republicans or Democrats, but as Americans united in our strong support for the people of Hong Kong.
The bills now go to President Trump for signing. According to media reports, White House officials expect him to sign. While many see the act as symbolic, it could alter the nature of relations between the United States and Hong Kong.
And in Hong Kong, hundreds gathered in the Central Business District today to support those still trapped at Polytechnic University.
Hundreds gather at the International Financial Center in Hong Kong at lunchtime to show their support for the city's ongoing protests.
I'm here to protest. We are here to voice out our message. We are so angry about the government now and the police force now. They're killing, they're murdering, they're massacring the Hong Kong people.
They chanted slogans like "Stand for freedom, stand with Hong Kong," 5 demands, not one less, and sang what many protesters now call the Hong Kong national anthem, "Glory to Hong Kong," which was created during the protests. Some explained that they want to preserve their freedoms and why they did not want to live under the rule of the Chinese Communist Party.
There are lots of acts that the Communist Party is doing in China that is illegal and, it's anti-human.
Meanwhile, protesters holed up in Polytechnic University surrounded by riot police are pondering their fate. There are fewer than 100 of them remaining on the site. Michelle, a 20-year-old student, says she chose to stay behind.
No matter how the police are threatening us outside and doing a lot of things to create horror, such as sending plainclothes on campus, using loudspeakers, shouting at us, playing surrender songs every day, I hope that everyone can continue to be strong.
Just can't sleep. We don't know how to go back home.
Violent clashes between police and protesters have been less common over the past few days. This may be because of the intense protests we saw on Sunday and Monday night. However, on local social media platforms, people have been encouraged to not risk getting arrested before this Sunday's elections. Paul Graney, NTD News, Hong Kong.
And in the evening there, several hundred people joined a sit-in protest at Yoho Mall in the city's centre. The magic of Christmas has arrived on famous Parisian boulevards as big stores put up traditional Christmas decorations. Our France correspondent David Vives is in Paris with the story.
At Galeries Lafayette, Christmas is coming. This year, the traditional Christmas tree and decorations arrived on November 20th. A show of lights, music, and marionettes. For more than a century, Christmas marionettes have brought joy to young and old along Parisian boulevards. This year, bees are buzzing. The little cooks are hard at work in the kitchen preparing honey. Some of them also fly planes or are on their smartphones while the queen relaxes.
This is very beautiful. There are beautiful colors and the theme is nice.
A few hundred yards away on the avenue, the decorations change behind department store glass. Playful turkeys wish to eat instead of being eaten.
Big stores in Paris are among the first places ready for Christmas celebrations. The decorations require so much work that the artistic team must prepare for Christmas 1 year in advance.
According to marionettist Sylvain Duclos, there are always new challenges when giving life to his characters.
The big challenge for me is to get sparkles in your eyes once the window opens. You never know if the marionette will work once you turn on the switch.
The brain behind the window's layout and character design is David Molière. He brings to life a tradition that was created after the First World War.
Il y avait un sentiment, un besoin de sortir du contexte qui était lourd.
The First World War brought very hard times on people, so Printemps had the idea to create a magic show behind this glass, some fairy tales to bring joy to people.
Large Paris stores spend between $100,000 and $300,000 for their Christmas decorations. Printemps welcomes around 10 million visitors each year on Christmas, including Paris residents and tourists.
This is transmitted from one generation to the next one. The parents saw the marionettes when they were young. They bring their children to see them, and so on.
The public will enjoy the decorations until January 6th, when they will be removed.
And also in France, Parisians celebrating Beaujolais Nouveau wine today, uncorking the first bottles of the year to celebrate the harvest season.
Celebrated on the third Thursday of November, the annual tradition dates back around a century. Made from hand-picked Gamay grapes from the Beaujolais province of France, it's the most famous young wine. It is a friendly wine, and as today is a celebration and the day to drink it, I am drinking it with my friends. Beaujolais Nouveau wine is different from other wines as it's consumed immediately after harvesting, making its taste light and fresh. Nicolas Decatur, a restaurant owner, says the Beaujolais Festival attracts more customers each year.
It's great for us. It's a good day for us.
This year's Beaujolais Nouveau Day celebrations come a month after the U.S. imposed a 25% tax on French wine and other EU goods in response to illegal EU aircraft subsidies.
For us, for my winery at least, it did not have too much of an impact. We did not lose any orders, but it is for the coming years that we are worried.
In 2018, the United States imported over 350,000 gallons of Beaujolais, which represent 15% of the young wine's exports.
I think the United States is nevertheless a good wine market.
He added that the tax will not stop him from trying to enter the U.S. market.
Contestants for Miss World 2019 posed for photos in front of London's Tower Bridge today, ahead of the final ceremony next month.
Hopefuls from 120 countries around the world braced for England's winter temperatures to take part in a photo call in the heart of the city. Are beauty pageants still relevant today? United States contestant Emmy Cuvelier thinks so.
Now, Miss World especially looks at a woman's heart, not just their outer beauty. They're looking at all of the things that make you, you, including your heart and what you're willing to do for others.
Mexico's Vanessa Pons, who took the crown last year, had some tips for this year's entrance. I think it has to be someone with a lot of compassion. You have to be tolerant, understand that your way of thinking is not the only one there is. China has hosted the ceremony for the past 2 years, but this year the pageant returned to its birthplace, the United Kingdom.
To be a Miss World, you don't need just a beautiful face, but you really need to have a beautiful heart, because like Miss World, you can make the difference on the earth.
The final ceremony will take place at Excel London on Saturday, December 14th.
The first cargo-carrying robot marketed directly to consumers is now on sale for the holiday season.
Italian scooter maker Piaggio is offering a robot that weighs 50 pounds and costs $3,250. Its name is the Gita, after the Italian word for a short, pleasurable excursion.
Instead of reaching for the keys to the car, you can go out for a walk with Gita.
Schnapp says the Gita doesn't require a phone, facial recognition, or GPS technology. It locks onto people using cameras and sensors and then tracks them. Corporate giants like Amazon, FedEx, and Ford have been publicly experimenting with their own robots used solely for deliveries. Other startups like Starship Technologies have delivery robots at college campuses and in other confined spaces.
I just didn't want to go out because it's so cold, so I ordered it to bring me lunch.
The San Francisco startup once looked at selling the machines directly to consumers too, but dropped the idea after realizing how much it would have to charge for them.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.